Champions today, champions forever. I am, of course, talking about the Michigan Wolverines, who had their punishment handed out to them for the Castellani sign-stealing scandal from 2023. That is all over and done with. Michigan was not stripped of their national championship. I am going to spend a whole segment talking about that because I have plenty to say. But we are going to start with our Detroit Tigers, who had a very good week. Welcome into I'll Say This. I am Chris Castellani. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show, I want to start with a few show notes. I'm at Castellani 2014 on Twitter. We're getting up to 10,000 on TikTok as well, so please follow me on that platform. That's been growing rapidly. If you like this podcast, you can find it on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and if you want to find it in audio form, it's available on Apple Podcasts. It is available on Spotify, and of course, you can go to castellanicontent.com, which is getting updated every single day with the content that Austin and I are creating. All right, let's jump right into it. Tigers had a very good week. Tigers went 5-2 on a 7-game road trip. They are now 7-3 in their last 10. And I want to make sure that I'm driving that home because I do feel like I study myself. I study my videos. I study what I say. It's like game film. And I want to be consistent. I do think that I have been maybe a bit overly negative in the last few weeks. Now, there was a time where I was legitimately terrified they were coughing up this division. I mean, they looked seriously terrible. And once it got to 5 games, it was becoming quite worrisome, honestly. Divisional lead is back up to 8.5. I think a big reason for the kind of sigh of relief is the fact that Cleveland's regressed. And this is something that I've talked about in the past. Collapses are a two-way street. You know, a team can collapse. That's all fine and dandy. You need another team in your division to ascend and play really well, which Cleveland was for a while. They've since taken a step back, just got swept at home by the Atlanta Braves. How have the Braves had such a bad year? They have so many good hitters in that lineup, but whatever. I digress. Divisional leads back up to 8.5. Tigers had a very good road trip, not playing great teams, obviously. You're playing the White Sox and playing the Twins, but you go 5-2. And I think that is kind of where my negativity has shined through, is the fact that I've pointed out the fact that they're playing these tense, nail-biting, sphincter-clenching games against bad teams. And while I prefer boring, I'd prefer a nice 6-1 victory, right? At the same time, I do think that what this team's been able to do over the last week or so, really 2 weeks, is pretty admirable. Because we saw a team in the first half that was really firing on all cylinders. It was all systems go. It was ball bouncing their way. They were pitching well. They were hitting well. It was clutch hitting. It was just everything was working. You were getting contributions from guys that you never expected to get contributions from. These are the dog days of summer, and these are the grinded out months, and these are the times when guys are banged up. And guys are starting to fall off a little bit. Glaber's really been struggling. I don't know if he's fully healthy. Hobby's taking steps back. Z-Mac's taking steps back. I mean, you had guys in the first half who were reliable, like Tommy Kahnle, who've completely fallen off a cliff. No, you have what you have now. You've already made your moves at the deadline. I will talk about those in a minute. But during this week, a week in which their Central Division lead went from, I think it was 5.5 or 6 to 8.5. You had 4 coin flip games. You had a game against Chicago where Torque hit a home run in the 9th inning to put you in front. You won that game. You had a 1-0 game against Chicago where Troy Melton stepped up and shoved for you through 5 innings. You had an extra innings game in Minnesota where you had to throw a runner out at the plate just to extend that game. And you had a wild back and forth drunk game on Saturday against Minnesota where it seemed like anything that could have possibly happened that was ugly did end up happening in that game. Those were 4 coin flips, and you won all 4 of them. And while I can complain and look at this team through a different lens, because I do internally say to myself, man, if you're struggling with Chicago, you're going to struggle with, you're going to struggle even more with Houston and Seattle. I mean, you're going to be in for a rude awakening. At the same time, I need to stand by my principle that I've always had, which is I'm never going to be angry about a win. They're finding ways to get it done. I think that this will be looked at as a very big stretch of the season, because if you have a team that is regressing, which is what the Tigers were doing for a while, the deeper it gets into a campaign and the more the divisional standings kind of change and the closer a team gets to first place or the closer a team gets to catching you, the more pressure is put on the team that's in first place or the team that's ahead of you. That's just the case. It was the case last year. The deeper it got, the more it was advantage Detroit because Minnesota was feeling the footsteps. I think for a brief minute, at least the fans, I can't speak for anybody else, the fans were worried about the footsteps that were being heard And thankfully, the Tigers have bounced back with it. What was a solid week of baseball. Now, one other thing that I want to talk about, because I hammered this organization and I hammered Scott Harris, as many other people did regarding the trade deadline. And the one thing I did say was, who knows? Like, I wasn't happy with it, but I did say they've taken on projects before. Maybe they can take on another one or a couple more and it works. Well, I don't think anyone at this point is coming away from this deadline saying that Scott Harris hit a home run. I'm feeling better about it than I did originally, in large part because of two guys. Morton looks pretty good, and I think that there's still going to be starts where Morton has issues with finding the zone, issues with the long ball. You know, he has given up a lot of hard contact this year, but it's clear that there is a very good pitcher there, and we've seen that, you know, throughout his career. But even for 41 years old, the stuff is excellent, and the curveball is fantastic. There's something there. Same with Kyle Finnegan, who's just been downright dominant. I mean, this is another prime example of where Chris Fetter's at his best. You take a pitcher with really good stuff, he adjusts his pitch mix a little bit. He's been great, and he's been brought in exclusively in high leverage and has yet to give up a run. 7 1/3 innings so far, but you know what? For a reliever at the deadline, that actually is kind of a big sample size, you know, because it's been a few weeks. That's great. Paddock, I don't think there's much to write home about. I know he had the miraculous outing on, I believe it was Friday. Still not totally sold on Rafael Montero necessarily, but I thought that this could be a team that legitimately had a chance of coughing up their own division with the lack of moves that they made at the deadline. I think at the very least they've been able to stabilize themselves in the regular season. I still don't see enough depth in this bullpen, quite frankly, really with the pitching staff as a whole. I mean, did you see how Flaherty looked in the last outing? For me to really think that this is a team that makes a deep playoff run, but it's, I guess, better than I originally thought, which still isn't necessarily great. And this, you know, leads to the question that I keep getting asked. And I get it. We're deep into the season. The team's 8.5 games up. You know, I get asked every day if I think that this is a team that can win the World Series. And, you know, by default, the answer is kind of yes, just because you get in, you got a shot. There is a pathway for them because the team that we saw in the first 100 games of the year, first 90 games, whatever you want to call it, that team does exist. I don't know if we see it again, but they could find it again in October, and all of a sudden we're talking about a team that's making a run to the Fall Classic or winning the Fall Classic. I think it's unlikely. I just don't think they have the horses. I think they have some really good players. I think it's a solid roster, but I've been looking around the league and I've been watching more of Toronto and watching more of Seattle and Milwaukee and some of these teams, or LA, and I just say to myself, I just don't think that we have the depth really anywhere. You know, there's a possibility, and I will at some point do a full breakdown of what needs to happen, but I don't think this is the team. And there were points in the first half where I thought maybe, but generally speaking, I think that this ball club has ended up being the team that I expected them to be, which is a very competitive group that is likely to win their division. I don't know if they can go further beyond that. I'd love to see it. And so much of this sport is based on vibes. And if they have a great final month of the season, and guys kind of find it, and Riley Green gets hot again, who knows, maybe I'll change my tune. But that's just kind of the way I view this team. One more thing I want to discuss with the Tigers, and it's about a minor leaguer, and that's Kevin McGonigle, who is having just a dominance, as good a minor league season offensively as we've seen by a young Tigers prospect ever. 67 games. His OPS across 3 levels is over 1,000. His OPS in AA alone in just 95 at-bats is 995. He hit 4 home runs this week alone. And because he's been that good, now he's only 20 years old, but because he's been that good, the question's been raised of, is there a chance we see Kevin McGonigle in September? Last year, I didn't think there was a shot in hell that we were going to see Jackson Jobe. Tigers got red hot. They were making a playoff push. They called up Jobe. Mixed results, sure, but you can't tell me it wasn't cool when that was announced, right? Could we see that with McGonigle? I still say no. Okay, I still don't think we see. About a month ago, 2 months ago, I would have put it at a 0% chance. Right now, I'd put it at about 20. Because the fact is, his numbers, whether it's just the regular basic numbers that you look at or the underlying numbers, are so dominant that it's an indicator of a guy who could probably adjust to major league pitching a lot quicker than almost anybody else in the minor leagues right now. In the minor leagues this season, in an age where great players strike out all the time. I mean, the Tigers' best position player is going to strike out 200 times this year. He has struck out 32 times and he's walked 43. Every time I refresh my Twitter feed, he's ripping a double or he's hitting a home run. And well, I still don't think the Tigers make the move and say, hey, buddy, at 20 years old, you're going from AA to the major leagues and you're going to help us for a playoff push. The fact that we're even discussing that right now is a testament to how talented this kid is. And his debut, when it happens, and again, I don't think it's this year, but who knows, will be the most anticipated debut by a Tiger that we've seen maybe in my lifetime, because it'll be the first time that we'll have called up a top prospect when we didn't suck. I know that sounds kind of strange, but think about it. When we called up Mize and Skubal and Paredes and Green and Torkelson or any one of these guys, the team was terrible, and while it was fun to see these guys come up and make their debut and take their lumps to a certain extent, they weren't playing for anything. McGonigle, and this is a lot of pressure to put on the kid, will be thrust into high leverage early on. Now, do I think he's that good? I kind of do. And I hate to build it up this much because it's almost like anything other than a 1,000 OPS at the major league level is somehow a disappointment. But this is as close to a sure thing as we've ever seen. And while I think internally Scott Harris doesn't want to roll the dice on potentially damaging a guy's confidence and calling him up from AA to the major leagues for a playoff push in September, they know how good he is. And if they think that the adjustment or the learning curve won't be that severe, they could do it. I'd still put it at about a 20% chance. But again, the fact that we're even discussing it, it just shows how incredible McGonigle's been. There's so much to be excited about with this guy. All right, let's talk about what was, I don't know, maybe probably the bigger story of the week, I guess. Maybe I should have let off with this, but it was Michigan football. The sign stealing saga, so much alliteration, has officially come to an end, not with a bang, but with a fizzle. Let's just go over the punishments to start right now. Okay, show cause penalty for Jim Harbaugh and Connor Stallions, essentially irrelevant. Harbaugh's not coming back to college anytime soon, and Connor Stallions, I don't think, will be coming back to football, at least to the college ranks, at any point here in the near future. Sharon Moore will serve a 2-game suspension to begin this season, and will have a 1-game suspension to begin the 2026 season. So I guess that he just won't be able to travel with the team to Frankfurt, Germany when they play Western Michigan. Michigan was hit with a $20 million fine and probation. No postseason ban, no vacated wins, no championship stripped away. The 40-3 over 3-season stretch and the national championship in 2023, the 15-0 season, still hold. Okay. People have been wondering and, asking me to talk about this for a long time. And my whole thing is, look, it's an active investigation. It's ongoing. I will speak on it when it's concluded. And it's a weird thing that exists in the modern age on the internet where it's viewed as a point of weakness to not speak on something. Sometimes the greatest gift a person can have is silence. Okay. I said, look, I will talk about it when it's reached its conclusion. Because at that point, the evidence will have mounted up. They'll have done their investigation. It'll be over. I'm not going to predict what I think is going to happen because I don't know. I haven't been paying as close of attention to this as other people have. And so it's now concluded. All right. Here's the first thing I will say, and this will probably bother a lot of people, especially this coming from a Michigan fan. I think the belief that Michigan got hit with nothing is nonsense. That is a take that comes strictly from people who think either the only punishment Michigan should have gotten was having their title taken away. Okay. Hitting them in their wallet does impact them quite a bit. Now I know that Michigan is a massive national brand with a ton of boosters and a ton of donors, and people can act like 20 million is going to be chump change for them. It's not. It's not. That impacts them on some level. I think it's a big reason why they are appealing. I can't imagine they'll win that appeal. But, this was a program that just hit the biggest home run arguably in their history with the recruitment of Bryce Underwood. right? Paying him $17 million. Well, the next time another Bryce Underwood comes along because of the repercussions of this, of the cheating, you may not be able to pay him. This could have some impact on them. Like, I don't think it's nothing. With that said, couple things that we can all agree on, okay? Because I'm a uniter, okay? I unite the peoples, and this is what I'm going to do. I think we can all agree on two things. One, this process was so much longer than it had any right to be. So unnecessarily long. Number two, the NCAA sucks. They are a wildly ineffective organization. You could find some random podunk group of people that run a local pickleball group in the west side of Michigan who are probably more efficient and more timely than anything the NCAA does. And this has existed with every investigation that they've ever done. I don't understand the length. They had a meeting about this on June 6th. What were you doing for 2 months? There's no way there was 2 months worth of going through this with a fine-tooth comb. Took 2 years, essentially, to finish this whole thing. All right. What ended up happening with this is exactly what I kind of figured would happen, which is that I remember very well the night Michigan won the national championship. It was the first night I worked with Austin. I was in Ann Arbor for it. It was a very special experience. And I remember that night, the NCAA commissioner coming out and saying, it looks like Michigan won the national championship fair and square. There was a whole lot to indicate that the punishment for this was not going to be to the level of severity that opposing fan bases wanted it to be. Michigan got popped for this in the middle of the season. And I'm sorry, but in what was a pretty big ball don't lie moment, as has been pointed out on social media, they won every difficult game on their schedule, sometimes without a coach, the entire time without Stallions. There was a lot of turmoil that they were dealing with. People aren't going to want to hear this, but that's a heavy ring that team is going to be wearing from now until the end of time. That's factual. Sorry. But what was also factual is that you had things like the NCAA commissioner coming out and saying that they won it fair and square. You had Pete Thamel, who had been reporting on this from the beginning, saying, I don't think that we can expect any vacated wins. I don't think that we can expect a postseason ban. I don't think that they're going to be stripped of their title. That was what was initially said the night Michigan won the national championship. But this is the problem with the NCAA, and this is the problem with this long-ass process, is that things picked up steam. And over time, you allow people to sit alone. What's the idle hands are the devil's playground, right? People, the theories just spawn, and this snowballed, and people got so frothed up and built up this idea that everything was going to get taken from Michigan. By the time it was done, they weren't going to have a university anymore. They were going to be teaching classes outside. Enrollment was going to go down to the hundreds. And then what happened was exactly what was said was going to happen the night Michigan won the national championship. And people act disappointed. Look, this has been exceptionally annoying. And I'll admit, it is difficult for me to be objective about this, speaking as somebody who was a fan of this program, who is a fan of this program, who is a fan of the 23 team, was a team that many Michigan fans connected with. That was an uncertain time in my life. I love that team to death. It's hard for me to be objective. And fandom is not an objective, or fandom is often very subjective, and fandom is often very hypocritical. And I, generally speaking, don't think there's anything wrong with that. I've read these tweets from people saying, if that was my program that did the same thing, I'd be embarrassed. You are full of fucking shit, okay? You're a goddamn liar, okay? Because I'm telling you, and I'm not mad at you. But if this happened at Bama or Georgia or LSU or Penn State or Michigan State or Ohio State, every one of those opposing fan bases would be doing the exact same defending of their program that Michigan fans are doing now. Stop acting like it's exclusive to U of M. Now, that doesn't make it right, what they did. That doesn't make the cheating somehow less impactful. But this is just what fandom is. It's sports. It's a kid's game. It's not objective. People have their teams. It's like politics. people are going to spin anything to fit certain narratives, right? And as a fan of Michigan, it's a bit of a hit that this happened. Because I think the one thing that has been pointed out is that in the court of public opinion, there will be a somewhat tainted view of this championship. And this has been pointed out to me by people who are trying to dunk on me, and my response is, I don't give a shit about the court of public opinion. My team won a championship. I make content for the internet. You can't care about what the court of public opinion thinks. You're going to lose your mind. And I think generally speaking, 99.9% of Michigan fans are going to feel the same way, which is that we experienced it. It happened. And they put 1 million guys in the NFL, and they won the toughest part of their schedule, and they beat Ohio State. And I absolutely understand the frustration that comes from people who believe that, where is the punishment, right? Or where is the line drawn? Because I think every fan base, both Michigan and beyond, would agree that Michigan would do this again, as would pretty much any program, if it means winning a national championship. So there are some conflicting feelings, but as a whole, all that for a drop of blood, Those were very fun teams as a Michigan fan, and I understand and have accepted in many ways. And this is just the truth. Like with other sports, if the Tigers win the World Series, people are going to be happy for us. If Dusty May wins the national championship, people are going to be happy for the Michigan basketball program. If the Lions win one, people are going to be happy for the city of Detroit. Michigan, I've just accepted as the one team that I root for, where outside of their own internal fan base, which is a big fan base. Like I said, it's a national brand. People are just never going to come around. And is it the best thing in the world? No, no, I'd prefer things to be a little bit more unified, but that's the grave, the hole they've dug for themselves. That's just something I've had to accept. I wouldn't take back the run that this team went on in those 3 years, the players we saw, the memories that were made. And while I completely understand the opposition's frustration with it, I want to be a little bit more subdued than just saying tough shit. But I think, and again, this is probably where my lack of ability to be objective about this comes in. I think college sports in general are a very unfair game. And I think it has been for a long time. And I think it was pre-NIL. The idea that players are just now getting paid is silly. Players have been getting paid forever. It just wasn't legal for the longest time. And I think that the sad truth is that as long as there's so much money involved, and as long as there's careers and egos and legacies on at stake, teams will find ways to bend the rules. That's not me defending it. That is me pointing out something that has been pretty damn true going back, many generations. Watch any documentary about the Miami Hurricanes in the 80s. Those teams squeaky clean. I think that's just it speaks more to the corrupt nature of the sport to me than it does the corrupt nature of a program or a university. But that's a conversation for another day. I am so glad that it's over. And we can now turn the page. And the next time I talk about Michigan football, we will be previewing the season, which I'm very much looking forward to. All right, a little Lions talk here before we end the program. Lions had a preseason game against the Dolphins at Ford Field. They lost the other day. Like I said, preseason football. I'm not necessarily going to break down everything that happened. The final score of a preseason game is kind of the last thing I pay attention to. A lot of guys either barely played or didn't play at all. Same issues kind of persist. Do you have a backup quarterback? Who knows? Whatever. I've already discussed all that. The one thing I think that is worth pointing out, because he stood out not just in the preseason games, but he stood out in the practices, both the regular practices, the joint practices, what have you. Isaac TeSlaa, this wide receiver from Arkansas, has kind of been lighting things up in the preseason. And it's a positive sign for an offense that already has an infinite number of weapons. And we're trying to get Nolan Bianchi on Chris and Company to discuss the Lions this week. And I do want to ask about that simply because if they have something with Isaac TeSlaa, Outside of maybe Howie Roseman, I think at this point we can say that there is no better GM in football. And I think you could even argue in some ways he's ahead of Roseman just because he's been here for a shorter amount of time in football who is better at finding explosive playmakers than Brad Holmes. Now I understand Holmes is built through the trenches as well, and like he's done a wonderful job. But when you have a team that hits with a bunch of first round picks, okay, you'll give him credit, you'll give him a thumbs up. But to me, the real sign of a great GM, of a guy who knows what he's doing, is a guy who's going deep into the draft, finding talent and taking risks that pay off. I know it was the first round, but people criticized the Jahmyr Gibbs pick. People criticized the Sam Laporta pick, right? Jahmyr Gibbs has the opportunity to be one of the best players in football this year. In fact, he probably was a year ago, right? Amon-Ra fell in the draft, right? And has been a franchise receiver for you. Now you have somebody like Isaac TeSlaa, even Jamo, Jameson, which I was about to say Waymo, who, you got in the first round again, but was coming off the knee injury, has paid off for you. If you have another one with Isaac TeSlaa here, I think that it's another major win and another huge weapon for Brad Holmes and another huge weapon for Jared Goff as this offense continues forward in their first year without Ben Johnson. It really is great to see. And I think that the wide receiver position is one that, and not to say this hasn't always been the case, but especially over the last, decade or so, I think the wide receiver position is the one where you're going to find the most anomalies and you're going to find the most diamonds in the rough, simply because so much of the success of a wide receiver in college is based around the quarterback that they have. I can't even remember the quarterback that Arkansas had. Was it Richardson? Was that his name for a while? Yeah, or Jefferson, right? KJ Jefferson. He's throwing the ball to Isaac TeSlaa. He doesn't have some elite quarterback. There are certain instances like the Jamar Chases and Jordan Jeffersons, Justin Jefferson. I always say Jordan Jefferson. Justin Jeffersons of the world who have an NFL quarterback thrown to him, but that's not in college. But that's not always the case. I think a prime example in the modern age, a guy at Michigan that I thought was great, they just never found creative ways to give him the ball, was Nico Collins. And Nico Collins goes, relatively deep in the draft. He's now one of the 10 best receivers in football because he's got C.J. Stroud throwing the ball and not Shea Patterson. Not trying to throw shade at Shea, but let's be real for a second. It's a much different situation. I think that that is a position that Holmes and company have kind of honed in on, where they can find those diamonds in the rough in the draft. They've been able to do that. I think TeSlaa may very well be another weapon. And while there are concerns about what the offense might look like under a new offensive coordinator, what version of Jared Goff are we going to get? It's very fair to say that unlike in the Stafford years, they have surrounded Jared Goff with an seemingly infinite number of toys and weapons for him to play with, and an offensive line, though I do have some concerns about the offensive line given what they've lost. But at the same time, this is not a situation where you left the cupboard bare. Yes, you lose your offensive coordinator, but you got a ton of great returning players. Oh, and you have this rookie that you could potentially play with as well. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. Yeah, just wanted to touch on that. That will do it for today's show. Follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. You can find me on TikTok. I think we're going to get to 10K by the end of the year. In fact, we're well over 8 right now. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but we are, we might get there by the end of baseball season, which is great. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us in audio form on Apple Podcasts. You can find us in audio form on Spotify. And of course, CastellaniContent.com is getting updated every single day with the content that Austin and I are creating. We're getting kind of to the home stretch of baseball. We're about to enter a really good period for sports with football and baseball going on as the Tigers continue to stay competitive. I'm really proud of what we're doing. I like what we're doing, but at the same time, what else do you want to see? Because I think the podcasts have been good. I think the interviews have been good, but we're always open to new things and suggestions. So just something to keep your eye out on. But we continue to appreciate all the support that you guys. We'll be back with the Chris and Company later this week as we continue to march forward. I will talk to you all again real soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.